Wondered 1. Conversation in the headmaster's office. After examining the scene, Snape hurried back to the castle with Matthew and went straight to the headmaster's office on the 8th floor. A stone gargoyle guarded the entrance. Speak the password and it would leap aside. Sherbet lemon, Snape said flatly. The gargoyle sprang aside, the wall behind it split, and a spiral staircase was revealed. Portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses lined the circular walls of the office, all gently snoring in their frames. A massive claw-footed desk dominated the room. On a shelf behind it sat a patched wizard's hat, the sorting hat. Dumbledore was still awake, reading letters. He removed his spectacles when he saw Snape and Matthew enter. "Severus, what brings you here so late?" he asked. "An incident in the Forbidden Forest," Snape replied. "Another unicorn is dead, killed by a black-robed, hooded figure. Potter, Draco, and Matthew encountered it." Dumbledore's face grew grave. "And the other two, were they hurt?" The portraits woke at the hint of gossip. Snape shook his head. "No students were injured. I had Hagrid escort them back to their common room. Matthew is the only one who fought the figure tonight." "Oh, Matthew, could you tell me what happened?" Dumbledore asked. "Of course, Professor." Matthew nodded and recounted the events. When he finished, a chorus of portraits began to chatter. "Ha ha! Worthy of a Black descendant. You kept your head in front of an enemy, Matthew Black. An excellent Slytherin," boomed a bearded, self-satisfied voice. "Phineas Nigellus Black, ancestor of the House of Black and a former headmaster." Snape asked Dumbledore, "Who do you think it was?" Dumbledore blinked. "I'd like to confirm it." He opened a drawer and took out sweets and a pastry. "Matthew, this honeycomb cake is rather good. Do try some. Professor Severus and I are going to the forest. Would you like anything to drink?" "A glass of milk, please, Professor." Dumbledore tapped the desk with his wand. A glass of milk appeared as if from the kitchens. Fawkes. Placing a hand on Snape's shoulder, Dumbledore summoned his phoenix. Fawkes left his perch, landed on Dumbledore's other arm, and in an instant carried both Dumbledore and Snape away. Matthew sat at the long table and began the cake. It was late, and after a duel with the hooded figure, he was famished. The portraits came to life around him, trading opinions. Phineas Nigellus began to boast. "As a Black, one must be exceptional, just as I was, Hogwarts' greatest headmaster." "Greatest! Shameless! You were the most unpopular headmaster ever," snapped Headmistress Dilys Derwent, cutting him down. Matthew, who knew enough about Phineas to agree, smiled inwardly. Undeterred, Phineas continued, "Matthew Black, I believe I must reconsider the Black succession. When you have time, visit the family home, 12 Grimmauld Place, and we'll discuss it." With the House of Black dwindling and Sirius imprisoned in Azkaban, Phineas meant to name a new heir. Matthew, surprised and flattered, readily agreed. "Very well, Ancestor Phineas. I'll find time to go to 12 Grimmauld Place." Fawkes deposited Dumbledore and Snape in the Forbidden Forest. Snape led the way to the spot where Matthew had fought the hooded figure. A scorched patch still marked the ground. Dumbledore crouched, pinched some blackened earth, and rubbed it between his fingers. His expression went very still. "Tom, you've truly returned," he murmured. Snape did not catch the name at first. "Dumbledore?" Dusting his fingers, Dumbledore rose. "I mean, Voldemort. He is back." Snape's face darkened. He had feared as much. "And what state is the Dark Lord in?" Dumbledore sighed. "I don't know, but he must be desperate. Killing unicorns may be a way to prolong life by drinking their blood. Unicorn blood can grant life and lift terrible curses, yet anyone who slays a unicorn is cursed. It is proof of how far he will go." Dumbledore had long suspected Quirrell of serving him, though he did not yet understand that Voldemort was attached to Quirrell. He had set a trap, using the Philosopher's Stone as bait to draw Voldemort out. Having confirmed what they could, Dumbledore and Snape returned to the headmaster's office. They said little in Matthew's presence. When he had finished his cake, Dumbledore dismissed him for the night. Once Matthew had gone, Dumbledore stared at the doorway and murmured, "Such an independent child, remarkable charisma, astonishing talent, so very alike. Another Slytherin, ancient blood, half-blood. Does Matthew remind you of anyone?" Snape drawled. Dumbledore met his eyes. "He is not like Voldemort. He has known warmth. He has love within him, Severus. Love is the greatest power." Snape's lip curled. "Another grand plan, great Albus?" Without waiting for an answer, he swept from the office. Silence fell. After a long while, a low murmur rippled around the portraits. Grindelwald. 102. Discussion among the four. In the centaur camp in the Forbidden Forest, a young centaur woke from sleep. He had the lower body of a horse with a silver mane and a human torso, arms, and head topped with platinum blonde hair. He stepped out of his wooden hut and lifted his face to the night. The sky was a scatter of stars. Some centaurs are born with the sight, able to glean shards of the future from the pattern of the stars. To the young centaur, the sky looked like a black canvas punctured by countless tiny holes. Through each wound, a sliver of cosmic light leaked. He read those leaks, catching fleeting images of what might come. His gift was keen. When he read the stars, he saw more clearly than most. After a moment, he frowned, unease crossing his face. The stars of destiny, they've shifted again. I can barely make anything out. Movement came from the edge of the camp. The centaur looked toward the entrance as the patrol returned. The forest had been restless lately. The tribe had organized patrols to guard the camp. The leader, a red-haired, bearded centaur with a gleaming chestnut bay body and a long red tail, trotted up. "Firenze, still up. It's time for your shift. Don't go wandering off in your head when you're out there. I just ran into Hagrid. He says another unicorn's dead," the leader said. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, Firenze answered, "Ronan, I just woke. I felt something and came out. The stars of destiny have changed again." Ronan snorted. "Of course they've changed. Another unicorn dead. Blame those humans." Firenze's brow tightened. That wasn't what he meant. He had long glimpsed the death of a unicorn, but it should not have been now. Nor should he have seen on that night the boy with the ill-fated destiny whom he had expected to meet. Everything had shifted. Centaur's sight did not obey will. It came in fragments by chance, and the stars never spoke plainly. The images had to be read and interpreted. Even centaurs erred in their readings. Perhaps he had misread the signs this time. He stared at the stars and murmured, "Why are the stars growing so hazy?" A few days later, in the Gryffindor common room, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville huddled together, speaking in low, urgent voices. Hermione was talking fast. "I found it," she said. "Unicorn blood can sustain life and even lift terrible curses. But drinking a unicorn's blood curses you too. You'll be preserved in a half-life, living in a kind of death. The hooded figure Harry saw must have killed the unicorn to drink its blood. I asked Hagrid. He said a great deal of blood was missing." Ron bit his lip, his face drawn. "Drinking unicorn blood to stay alive? The price is worse than death. If you're cursed for the rest of your life, why not just die?" Harry was distracted, trying to piece together the fragments of that night. When he had seen the hooded figure, his scar throbbed with pain, and he had had, for an instant, a flash of an image. No sound, just a single, blazing picture. He touched the lightning-shaped scar, trying to recall it. It had seemed to be in the Forbidden Forest, and he thought he had seen 3 figures and a dog. Had that been the moment he met the hooded man? Why wasn't the man in the image, and where had the image come from? He couldn't make sense of it. Hearing Ron, he said, "Being cursed for life is terrifying, unless he has no other choice and had to drink unicorn blood to stay alive." Suddenly, several pieces clicked together in Harry's mind. He remembered the Philosopher's Stone he and Hagrid had taken from Gringotts before term began. He thought of the 3-headed dog guarding the trapdoor on the 3rd-floor corridor. And he recalled Hagrid's words the night they first met. "Some say he's dead. I think that's rubbish. He hasn't got enough humanity left in him to die." A cold, solid dread clenched Harry's chest. His voice came out in a rush. "Lord Voldemort." The 3 friends looked at him, fear plain on their faces. Harry glanced around. The common room was mostly empty, and no one had picked up on their conversation. He lowered his voice. "It's Voldemort. He needs something to keep him alive. He's been killing unicorns and drinking their blood. He wants the Philosopher's Stone." "Don't say that name," Ron hissed, voice tight with panic. Neville, from a wizarding family, looked pale and terrified. Hermione breathed hard but forced herself to reason. "It wouldn't be Snape helping him," she said. "Snape would have shown himself in the forest that night if he were in league with Voldemort. And look at Professor Quirrell. He hasn't been himself these last few days. He took 3 days off after that night. When he came back, he looked ghastly and his speech is wrong." Isn't he supposed to stutter? Ron asked. Yes, but this is different, Hermione snapped. Now he sounds weak, as if something's using him up. The timing's suspicious. Right now, Quirrell is the most likely suspect. They exchanged worried looks. The last few days had distracted them from lessons. They'd missed small changes in the staff. Harry couldn't find any more decisive clues against Quirrell, but Hermione's reasoning made sense. Quirrell seemed the most suspicious at present. At the very least, Harry said firmly, we should tell Professor Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall what we think. 103. Dumbledore's test? Inside the room of requirement, a wisp of green smoke curled upward. On the long table sat an exquisitely crafted incense burner, releasing the scent of a second-tier azure jade incense. Azure jade incense is excellent for expanding a wizard's spirit sea. Used during meditation, its effects are greatly amplified. This was one of Matthew Black's gains from Alsha. Alsha's own magical aptitude had never been high. She'd spent considerable resources just to reach formal wizard, and Matthew had found many auxiliary cultivation items in her Whitestone Manor. Azure jade incense was one of them. A fragrance beyond ordinary human perception wafted from the burner. Matthew circulated his meditation method, and his spirit sea swelled with a constant, expansive sensation. In the wizard system that cultivates through the meditation method, advancing through the third-level wizard apprentice stage requires long-term accumulation. Expanding the spirit sea to its limit at this stage usually takes a long time and varies by person. Even with Matthew's excellent aptitude, it would normally take 2 or 3 years. But with the aid of Professor Snape's improved potion and Alsha's resources, Matthew had shortened that process to about 3 months, an almost terrifying acceleration. After more than an hour, Matthew felt the expansion in his spirit cease and sensed a vague restraint. He understood immediately this was the limit for the apprentice stage. The next step would be to inscribe his innate spell into his spirit sea and break through to formal wizard. Lately, Matthew had been thinking about translating Hogwarts magic into runic magic. He wanted to make Transfiguration his innate spell to deepen his mastery of it. Transfiguration was extremely complex, but Matthew was confident he could render it in runes. He'd already translated the illumination charm. The first success is always the hardest. Once he had a reference point, other translations would be easier. When he finished his meditation, he extinguished the azure jade incense and put the unused pieces into his pocket. It was expensive and useful. Even for a formal wizard, a second-tier azure jade incense was valuable, and Matthew wasn't about to waste any of it. He left the room of requirement, checked his pocket watch, and saw it was still early, not yet mealtime. It was Sunday. There were no classes. He decided to return to the common room to rest for a while. The previous night, Harry Potter and his 3 friends in the Gryffindor common room had concluded that Professor Quirrell, a minion of you-know-who, intended to steal the Philosopher's Stone. They wanted to tell Professor Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall. Not knowing where Dumbledore's office was, they went to McGonagall's office first. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall was in. She looked at them with a frown. Is there something you need? Professor McGonagall, where is Professor Dumbledore's office? Hermione said. She took a breath. We want to see him. You want to see Professor Dumbledore? McGonagall's frown deepened. Professor Dumbledore has gone to London for a meeting today and is not at Hogwarts. If you have anything urgent, you may tell me. Harry's voice tightened. Dumbledore isn't at Hogwarts? What about the Philosopher's Stone? The Philosopher's Stone? McGonagall's expression sharpened, surprise and skepticism mixing in her eyes. How do you know about that? Professor, we deduced that Quirrell, you-know-who's servant, will try to steal the Philosopher's Stone. We must tell Professor Dumbledore. Harry didn't say Quirrell's name outright. They had no concrete proof so he only said that a servant of you-know-who was after the stone. Professor Dumbledore is very busy and may be away for a few days, McGonagall said after a pause. I don't know how you came to know about the Philosopher's Stone, but be reassured, it is well protected. No one will be able to take it. But, Harry protested. Harry, this is not for you to worry about. McGonagall shut the conversation down. Today is Sunday and the sun is out. I suggest you go outside and enjoy it. Reluctantly, Harry and the others left. McGonagall did not seem to believe them, and with Dumbledore gone, Harry felt frustrated and helpless. Dumbledore being away makes this the easiest time for the stone to be stolen, Hermione said, analyzing. Harry clenched his jaw. We have to act. Someone must watch Professor Quirrell. Stand guard outside the staff common room. Hermione nodded. We'll take turns. If anyone sees Quirrell head for the fourth-floor corridor, they'll alert the rest of us. That afternoon, Harry, Ron, and Neville were playing wizard's chess in the common room, but their heads weren't in the game. Ron held a piece between his fingers for a long time before setting it down. Harry and Neville were equally distracted. Hermione had gone to stake out Quirrell outside the staff common room, and none of them could focus on anything else. The common room door opened, and the three of them looked up, expecting Hermione. When it wasn't her, they felt a small, hollow relief and an odd disappointment. Ron forced himself to place his piece on the board. Your move, Harry. Harry stared at the chessboard, but his mind wandered. Then the common room door opened again, and Hermione hurried in. Her face was pale and anxious. The others felt a sudden chill. Professor Quirrell went to the fourth-floor corridor. I saw him, she blurted. And when I came back, I passed Professor McGonagall's office. She wasn't there. What should we do? It really is him. Ron clutched his hair. What do we do? We have to stop him. If Quirrell gets the Philosopher's Stone, you know who will return. Harry said, troubled. Should we find another professor, like Professor Snape? Seeing their surprise, Harry hurried to explain. I saw Professor Snape and Quirrell arguing. Maybe Snape will help us stop Quirrell. They went at once to Snape's office in the dungeons, but Professor Snape wasn't there either. Ron ripped at his hair in despair. It's over. You know who's coming back. A determined glint appeared in Harry's eyes. I'm going to stop Quirrell. Are you mad? Ron snapped. He's a professor. How could you possibly stop him? Neville, who had been quiet, spoke up in a small voice. You forgot. There's still one person who might be willing to help us. He could stop Quirrell. The others' faces brightened as they remembered. They exchanged looks and all at once shouted, Quick, go get Matthew, our senior. 104. Dumbledore's Test. When Matthew Black had confronted the black-robed figure in the Forbidden Forest, he had stopped him cold. Whether that figure had been Quirrell or Lord Voldemort didn't matter. What mattered was that Matthew had the strength to stand against him. Harry and the others hurried straight for the Slytherin common room, which sat on the same floor as Professor Snape's office. They hadn't gone far before they ran into Geralt leaving the common room. The sun was bright, and Geralt was supposed to be meeting his girlfriend for a walk by the Black Lake. Surprisingly, he was still dating the Ravenclaw senior Lisa and hadn't changed. Are you looking for Matthew Black? He asked. He remembered they knew Matthew. Yes. Is Matthew in the common room? Harry asked. He came back not long ago. I'll go fetch him. Wait here. After Harry and the others thanked him, Geralt scratched his head and hurried away. Matthew arrived shortly. Geralt didn't linger. He had to find his girlfriend. Seeing the anxious faces, Matthew asked, What's happened? Hermione quickly told him everything. Harry pleaded, We can't find a professor. We need your help. Matthew rubbed his chin. He'd long suspected that someone would try to steal the Philosopher's Stone soon. He'd been looking for a legitimate way to get involved. This was an opportunity. He had prepared for the stone's safety, so of course he wouldn't refuse. All right, he said quietly. But we need to move fast. With Matthew's help, the group finally had a chance. They ran to the fourth-floor corridor. The door at the end, which ought to have been locked, stood ajar. Quirrell went in. So it really is him, Ron blurted. Quiet. He could still be in there, Hermione hissed. Ron immediately clamped a hand over his mouth. Matthew drew his wand and pushed the half-open door. The room seemed empty, except for the three-headed dog. The harp Quirrell had used to keep it asleep was silent. The creature had woken. At the sight of them, it bared its fangs and lunged. Matthew pointed his wand at the chains on the dog. The ropes and cords turned into iron links and wrapped tight, binding the beast. It thrashed wildly, but couldn't break free. I know how to deal with it. Harry, who'd taken out Hagrid's flute earlier, quietly put it away. Hurry, Matthew said, and opened the trapdoor in the floor. He jumped down first. The drop was deep. After a long fall, Matthew hit something soft, a tangle of vines. When the others fell behind him, the vines were already winding around them. Devil's snare, Hermione said, recalling herbology. Professor Sprout said it likes dark, damp places and is afraid of fire. She drew her wand. Incendio. The flames drove the plant back and revealed a passage. Matthew didn't concern himself with the rest of the trial. He was here for Quirrell. He left the puzzles to the first years. Using his seeker reflexes, Harry caught the right key from the flock of flying keys and opened the next door. Ron's skill with chess got them through the enchanted game, though Ron was badly hurt and couldn't continue. They reached the next chamber. Shelves piled with potions ringed the room, and in the center stood a stone basin. The doorway beyond glowed with a cold, eerie light, and over the frame 4 words were carved: "The living shall not enter." Hermione snatched up a roll of parchment and read. Her face went pale. "Only those who are dead can pass through that door," she whispered. "Most of these potions will put someone into a long sleep. Only one is different. Pour it into the central stone basin, and it will give you the key to the doorway." "Only the dead can pass?" Matthew frowned and took the parchment to read for himself. The instruction was unmistakable. He picked up a bottle, removed the stopper, and sniffed it, waving his hand through the mouth. It smelled of a sleep draught. There were more than a dozen bottles. After a while, he narrowed the field down until 2 remained, nearly identical and both unidentifiable. "These are both similar," he said. "Most of the potions here will only cause sleep. They aren't deadly. If it only puts you to sleep, we could try a little," Hermione suggested. "If you don't fall asleep, it must be the right one." Neville stepped forward without hesitation, picked up a bottle, and took a tiny sip. "A bit sweet," he said. Then his eyes rolled up and he collapsed backward. Harry snatched him before he hit the floor. "So, it was that one," Matthew said. He poured the remaining potion into the stone basin. The liquid ran down a small drain and something clicked. The stone split, revealing a small compartment. Inside was another sheet of parchment. Matthew unfolded it. It was a potion recipe, one that would put the drinker into a brief living dead state. He frowned. It made sense. Quirrell might have been able to go through the doorway because of some special condition. He hadn't passed in the ordinary living sense. For anyone else to cross, they would need to brew this potion. Matthew's jaw tightened. The concoction didn't take long, but it demanded precise technique. One slip and it would become real poison, turning the drinker into an actual corpse. He thought about Dumbledore. This part of the trial felt tailored. Had Dumbledore altered this stage knowing Harry and the others would reach it? They had taken time getting through the previous levels. There would have been time to change things. Was this a test aimed at him? He glanced casually at Hermione. If he used her to test the potion, Dumbledore would certainly be watching them much more closely from then on. 105. Mere test. The ingredients for brewing the draught of living death were in the cabinet of the stone platform, common components, and all the necessary equipment had been prepared. Matthew Black gathered the materials and began brewing at once. The draught did not take long to make, but it demanded extremely precise handling. The smallest mistake could turn it into a deadly poison. In barely 10 minutes, he had finished. A pot of dark green liquid bubbled in the cauldron. Even a potions master could not tell by eye if there was a fault. A special reagent was needed to test its effects. While Matthew worked, Hermione read over the instructions on the 21. She ran the recipe through several times. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying how unsettled she was. When Matthew finished, she put the 21 down. "Let me test it." Her voice shook, but she spoke what she believed was the best option. Harry, who hadn't read the 21, looked at her in confusion. Matthew ladled a vial of the draught from the cauldron and said slowly, "This draught of living death, if brewed incorrectly, it becomes a poison that can turn a person into a true living corpse. This is the first time I've brewed this draught," he added. "I can't be certain whether this batch is perfect." Harry's anxiety flared. "You can't be sure whether it's poison. How can you drink it?" "I'm the weakest fighter here," Hermione said, biting her lip. "It's most appropriate for me to test it." She seemed ready to accept becoming a living corpse rather than stand by and watch Voldemort obtain the Philosopher's Stone. Harry snapped at her. "You're insane. If this is poison..." Matthew understood what neither of them had said aloud. When he had seen the recipe, he realized the test was not only about brewing skill. This level was arranged, one of those trials set by the teachers. He was different from the four younger students, including Harry. He was mature and steady. Dumbledore likely expected he would see through the setup. The other obstacles had matched the students. Harry already had Hagrid's flute for the three-headed dog. The properties of Devil's Snare were taught in herbology. Hermione's intellect made her the obvious candidate for logic puzzles. Wizard's chess was Ron's area, and the flying keys suited a seeker like Harry. This trial was designed to see whether a student would selfishly use others to test the potion or trust their teachers. It may also have been intended to test Neville, but he had fainted during the earlier 29 screening, which let Hermione show her courage instead. Everything fit too neatly. If he trusted his teachers, Matthew reasoned, there would be a remedy even if this vial proved to be dangerous. "I brewed it myself," he said with a small laugh. "So I'll test it. Maybe there's another way," Harry protested. He did not want anyone to risk such a potion. Matthew took the vial, activated the certain traversal function, and Harry and Hermione's voices faded away. He returned to the wizard tower. He had grown accustomed to traversing with the four. The travel no longer bothered him. The wizard tower was an external asset, but at times like this, it felt like part of his strength. "Welcome back, Master." A blonde girl stood before him. Her features were delicate. She wore a black, off-the-shoulder dress that showed her collarbones. Golden hair fell over pale shoulders, a small fishbone braid on the right side lending a playful touch. Her glowing blue eyes and the silver patterns on her neck made it clear she was not human. "Oriana, test this vial," Matthew said, handing the potion to her. Oriana was a golem assistant, and so 5. Matthew had not spent much time in the wizarding world lately, but he still visited occasionally. After the Gill Merchant Guild delivered mithril ore, he had Chris help refine it. Although the alchemy workshop could have refined the metal, using Chris saved the tower a little magic and time. Chris was a skilled smith and finished the refining quickly. Once the materials were ready, 10,000 degrees of magic from the first 6 had been consumed to create the golem assistant. "Please wait a moment." Oriana took the draught and walked to the 3rd floor. The potion workshop was there, the place for brewing and testing potions. Matthew followed. A faint light screen isolated the floor above. That barrier kept the bio-workshop's mutated creatures sealed. Nauf, too, had once advised him to wait until he became a formal wizard before clearing the creatures, which were potentially dangerous, so the 4th floor had remained closed for a long time. The potion workshop resembled the alchemy workshop, full of instruments and devices, once capable of producing potions automatically. Oriana took a drop from the draught, placed it on a clear receptacle, and slid it into a device that looked like a black box. "Do you know what ingredients you used? That will shorten the test," she asked, tilting her head. Matthew recited the ingredients and their properties. Oriana operated the instrument, and in less than 5 minutes, the results appeared between them as a translucent light screen. Test results. Consuming 50 to 100 milliliters induces a living corpse state. The effect begins to fade after 10 minutes and fully dissipates after 30 minutes. Please do not use frequently. Consuming more than 100 milliliters for 7 consecutive days will cause permanent living corpse condition. So the draught did what it was supposed to, temporary incapacitation rather than irreversible harm. That saved Matthew a great deal of trouble. If the vial had been a failed poisonous brew, he would have had to rebrew it in the potion workshop and replace the hazardous batch at Hogwarts. "Thank you, Oriana." Although Tu had once said Oriana had no emotions, her lifelike appearance and intelligence often made Matthew treat her as if she were human. The golem assistant gave a small bow. The bright skin revealed by her boat-neck black dress caught his eye for a second before he looked away. He pocketed the vial, activated the 13, and returned to Hogwarts Castle. Harry and Hermione were still where he'd left them, anxious and gaping. Without hesitation, Matthew put the vial to his lips and drank the draught of living death. After Matthew drank the bubbling dark green draught, the change came quickly. His skin went dull and lifeless. Moments later, it began to crack. All the blood in his body felt as if it were congealing. Black-purple veins bulged beneath the surface, and through the fissures he could just make out blood that had darkened to the same hue. Yet he felt no pain. Harry and Hermione stared, blanching. Hermione felt as though a hand were tightening around her throat. She was too tense to speak. "Senior Matthew?" Harry's voice trembled. He feared the potion had been a poison that had failed to kill. "I'm fine. Looks like I brewed it right on the first try." Matthew pinched his own skin. It had lost all sensation. He tested a simple spell with his wand. The living dead draught did not hamper his magic. Relief washed over Harry and Hermione. They had been scared out of their wits. As they prepared to ladle another portion from the cauldron, Matthew said, "We'll be facing Quirrell soon. Harry, come with me. Hermione, stay and look after Neville. If you can, get both him and Ron to the hospital wing." Hermione hesitated for only a heartbeat. She knew her combat skills were the weakest. Staying might be safer for them. She cast the levitation charm on Neville's clothes, lifted him, and left through the same doorway they had entered by. Harry took a portion of the living dead draught and drank it. Moments later, his skin went dull and cracked in the same way. "Amazing. There's no feeling at all, like a local anesthetic," he murmured, touching his cheek and starting at how foreign the face beneath his fingers felt. "Let's go. We'll probably meet Quirrell soon. Stay sharp, Harry." Matthew led the way through the door marked "No Entry for the Living," its eerie light chilling to the soul. "Protego," he muttered, casting the shield charm the instant he crossed the threshold. Nothing happened to the shield, no spells struck, but Matthew kept his guard up and swept the room with his senses. The chamber was empty, save for a tall gilt mirror standing several meters away, the Mirror of Erised. "The Mirror of Erised?" Harry said, stepping closer. He glanced around and saw no door to the next room. "Do we get through by using the mirror?" Matthew's mouth went quiet. He had sensed a ripple of unfamiliar mana in the corner, a trace of Quirrell, but when he looked, the corner was empty. Quirrell was hiding. They had arrived a little late. Only Harry could draw out what the mirror concealed, Matthew realized, so he stayed silent. "You've seen this mirror before? Take a look," Matthew suggested. Harry hardly needed persuading. He wanted, more than anything, to see his parents. He stepped before the glass. The reflection that looked back at him was himself, but ashen and cracked, a face drained of blood, an animated corpse. "I look awful," he said, and reached to touch his cheek. The reflected Harry did not mirror the movement. Instead, the image slipped a hand into its pocket and drew out a bright red stone. The reflected Harry smiled and tucked it back inside. At that instant, Harry felt his own pocket grow heavy. He plunged his hand into it and pulled out the very red stone he had just seen in the mirror. "What is it?" he asked, bewildered. Before Matthew could answer, the mana in the corner shifted. Quirrell materialized and lunged at Harry. "Harry, watch out!" Matthew shouted and struck with a spell. "Diffindo!" A sharp whistle split the air as a white, crescent wind blade shot for Quirrell. He dissolved into a black mist and slipped aside. When the mist cleared, he was already beside Harry, snatching for the red stone. The moment his fingers closed around it, and on Harry's hand, his face contorted and he screamed, "Ah!" Quirrell jerked his hand back. Blisters were rising along his skin. "It is you, Quirrell!" Harry yelled, stunned by the sudden assault. Agony twisted Quirrell's features, but a voice rasped from him nonetheless. "Ha ha! Well done, Quirrell. You took the Philosopher's Stone from Harry Potter. Let me speak with him." Quirrell, enduring the pain, unwound the huge turban from his head. He slowly turned, revealing the hideous, flesh-like face embedded in the back of his skull, Lord Voldemort. The hoarse voice went on, savoring the moment it had long awaited. "Look at me, forced to share a body to take shape, but thanks to you, Harry, the Philosopher's Stone is mine. Once I brew the elixir of life with it, I shall." A blade of light sliced through Quirrell's arm before he could finish. The severed limb, still clutching the stone, was whipped away by a vine that had sprung from nowhere. "Lord Voldemort, daring to turn your back on me in such a state." Matthew caught the Philosopher's Stone as the vine delivered it, and spoke coolly. Both the blade and the vine were creations of his transfiguration. "You again, Matthew Black!" Lord Voldemort roared through Quirrell. "Kill him. Take back the stone." The moment Matthew secured the Philosopher's Stone, he activated the metal disc's travel function. Voldemort's voice dwindled and faded. The wizard tower blinked into being around Matthew as the travel function rematerialized him inside the tower. It had always been the plan. Once he had the stone, he would take it to the alchemy workshop in the tower for analysis. The workshop's analyzer could deconstruct alchemical creations and magical artifacts, reverse engineer them into their recipes. It would take time, but Matthew could remain in the tower while the analyzer ran. "Oriana, analyze this philosopher's stone and extract its recipe," he said, placing the blood-red stone into the hands of his golem assistant. "Please wait a moment," Oriana replied. The golem accepted the stone and carried it to the second-floor alchemy workshop. Inside, she set the stone into the analyzer and began the process. After a short pause, she reported, "Master, analyzing this alchemical item will take roughly 10 days. 10 days. Matthew rubbed his chin. There would be a great mana cost. His quick mental tally told him the analyzer would need vast reserves. Good thing Alsha supplied the resources, he said, weighing the trade-off. 10 days later, in the alchemy workshop of the Wizard Tower, the assistant automaton Oriana was still running the analyzer. The analysis of the Philosopher's Stone was nearing completion. A moment later, the analyzer's casing reopened, and the intact stone lay on the tray at its center. As Oriana finished, the tower spirit immediately displayed the results to Matthew Black. Matthew was reading in another room when a translucent screen of light materialized before him with the announcement, "Analysis successful. Refining method. Materials used. Relief eased out of him." The Philosopher's Stone was unmistakably the work of the master alchemist Nicholas Flamel. The refining process was fiendishly complex and had consumed a massive amount of arcane energy. If he hadn't had the large boost to the tower's power reserves from the celebration banquet held under Alsha's identity, he would have needed to find other ways to recharge. He had already synchronized the magical material database with data from the Hogwarts world, so the analysis listed both Hogwarts world materials and alternative items from the wider wizarding world. Refining another Philosopher's Stone would require a vast wealth of resources. Having options from both worlds made it far more feasible. Matthew scanned the materials list and noted the requirement for gold essence, refined from a great quantity of real gold and exceedingly expensive. Fortunately, with access to resources from both worlds, acquiring gold wasn't a problem. Other scarce ingredients could be obtained under Alsha's identity as well. Oriana rolled the tray over and presented the Philosopher's Stone. "Thank you, Oriana." Matthew picked it up and gave a command. 0. Save the formula for the Philosopher's Stone into the database. "It has been recorded in the database," the tower spirit replied. Cradling the stone, Matthew activated the teleportation sigil and returned to Hogwarts Castle. Harry Potter and Professor Quirrell were still where he had left them. As soon as Matthew appeared, a harsh, rasping voice filled the room. "Damn you, Black! Kill him quickly! Get the Philosopher's Stone back for me." Quirrell, whose arm Matthew had severed earlier, still couldn't move properly. He sat clutching the bloody stump, howling in agony, and had no time to obey. Voldemort's voice rose with fury. "What a useless waste! Drink that potion quickly, if you don't want to die this instant." Quirrell forced himself to ignore the pain and fumbled for a vial. The potion would let Voldemort briefly seize control of Quirrell's body and channel some of his power. They'd paid for it with the dragon egg, bought with Voldemort's dark knowledge by way of exchange, and by a stroke of luck they had just enough. Matthew could not stand idly by while they used it. He sent the transfigured vines he'd been controlling to seize Quirrell's remaining right hand, but Quirrell, on his guard, melted into a swirl of shadowy mist. The vines passed through harmlessly. By the time the mist reformed, Quirrell had already swallowed the potion. The face on the back of Quirrell's head convulsed into a wild laugh. His head twisted a full half-turn, his neck nodded, and the face of Lord Voldemort swung to the front. Voldemort moaned, relishing the sensation. "Ah, so long since I felt the weight of a body." The severed wand that had fallen while Quirrell was drinking snapped into Voldemort's hand as if by will. "Black, I know you, your talent. Even I cannot help but marvel. You are an outstanding Slytherin." He tried to unnerve Matthew with honeyed words. "We are both remarkable Slytherins. Outstanding people belong with outstanding people. We need not be enemies. I possess immeasurable knowledge of the dark arts here. Hand over the philosopher's stone to me." Voldemort grew more fluent as he adapted to the borrowed body, but Matthew answered in a way Voldemort did not expect. He flicked his arcane focus, and the vines on the floor elongated and flattened into long, razor-sharp blades slashing toward Voldemort. "Your era is over," Matthew said. "Return to the underworld where you belong." "You ungrateful wretch," Voldemort hissed. "I gave you a chance." A thick, shadowy mist erupted around him, forcing back Matthew's blades. Voldemort spat two simple words, "Avada Kedavra." A green jet of killing curse hurtled at Matthew. His expression changed in an instant. This was unlike any spell he had faced. Just looking at the green light felt as if a pair of giant hands were closing around his heart. He triggered the 3 protective wards he wore. A shield of translucent polygons sprang up. 4 ice crystal barriers locked into place, and a spherical force field blossomed around him. 3 defenses at once. The green beam shredded the first ice shield immediately. The polygonal barrier held only a moment before splintering. The force field blocked the blast a little longer, but began to crack. That, however, was all Matthew needed. He pulled a cement sack filled with fine sand from his pocket dimension and hurled it forward. The interior layout of that space did not respond well to raw arcane energy, and there were few spare items in the room. Even the earlier blades and vines had been parts of his clothing transfigured. He needed real material to scale up the transfiguration. As the sack flew out, it burst into a roaring sea of fire, forcing Voldemort back and breaking his concentration. The green light, robbed of momentum, collapsed and faded after prying through the force field. Matthew raised his arcane focus high, and a pillar of flame shot up, filling the room in an instant. Except for Matthew and Harry, everything was consumed by the inferno. Screams, an agonized, shrill chorus of Voldemort and Quirrell, echoed from inside the pillar. Harry, who had been pushed into a corner, watched in stunned disbelief. He had never imagined the Tower Spirit's power could manifest like this. For a moment, he did not even realize the pillar was the result of transfiguration. Gradually, the voices within the fire dwindled until they were gone. Just as Harry thought the danger had passed, a charred right hand, fingers blackened, bone exposed, reached from the blaze and grabbed his throat. Harry's windpipe closed beneath its grip. He gagged and clawed at the hand, choking. A face, burned beyond recognition, took shape amidst the flames. But the hand that squeezed Harry began to crumble as if it had been touched by a deadly poison. Flakes fell away, and it disintegrated. The rot spread like a contagion over the body now inhabited by Voldemort. Quirrell's form shuddered and collapsed. "It is all because of you," Voldemort rasped between spasms. "Because of you. I have ended up like this, Harry Potter. I will, personally, kill you, and you, Matthew, Black." Quirrell's borrowed body could not withstand the combined effect of the mysterious force around Harry and the flames. It fell back into the pillar, and under their combined onslaught, was burned to ash. Only when Matthew could no longer sense any magical fluctuations within the pillar of fire did he cancel the spell. The conjured flames that had filled the room vanished at once. In the corner, Harry's face was etched with relief. Just when he'd thought it was over, Voldemort had seized him by the throat, but the Dark Lord had been at the end of his strength and had done no real damage. The searing heat that still clung to Voldemort's hands, however, had scorched Harry's neck. It now burned fiercely. Not far in front of him lay a small pile of black ash, Quirrell's last remnant. "Harry, are you all right?" Matthew asked, surprised at the scalded skin. Though the flames had obscured his sight, Matthew had kept watch over the room with his magical senses. He had known Voldemort would go for Harry. He also knew the Dark Lord could do nothing with the surrounding fire. The blaze was Matthew's transfiguration, under his control, so Voldemort could not use it to kill the boy. That was why Voldemort's hands had not burst into flames when he grabbed Harry. That the residual heat alone had burned Harry was something Matthew had not foreseen. "I'm fine. Ow!" Harry twisted his neck and winced. Matthew drew a small vial of healing draught from his pocket and poured it over Harry's reddened skin. The burn improved at once. "It doesn't hurt anymore. Potions are amazing." Harry rubbed his neck. The pain had gone, leaving only a slight itch. Matthew handed him the 2/3 full flask. "It isn't fully healed yet. Use this again tonight, and you should be fine." "Thanks, Matthew," Harry said gratefully, taking the flask. He glanced at the Philosopher's Stone in Matthew's hand, met his eyes, and asked nervously, "What do we do now?" "Quirrell has been reduced to ash, but Voldemort may not be dead. He said he'd kill me himself. I think he escaped. And the stone. What do we do with it?" Harry's look betrayed an instant of fear that Matthew might take the stone. After all, it was the Philosopher's Stone, and its temptation was immense. Only the two of them were present. If Matthew had wanted to, he could have cast Obliviate. Matthew smiled faintly. He could read the worry in Harry's mind. "I also think Voldemort isn't dead, but that's for later. Let's go to the headmaster's office. Perhaps Professor Dumbledore has returned." When Matthew had filled the room with conjured flames, he'd felt something odd, a faint, well-hidden ripple of magic. Had he not been at the very limit of a young wizard's ability, with his senses sharpened, he might have missed it. He guessed the ripple came from Dumbledore, watching all along. Relieved that Matthew had no intention of keeping the stone, Harry exhaled. His senior really was reliable. His stature rose still higher in Harry's eyes. "All right, let's see whether Professor Dumbledore is back. If not, we'll find another professor," Harry said. Matthew nodded and led him to the headmaster's office on the 8th floor, where a stone gargoyle blocked the door. "Sherbet lemon," Matthew said, trying the password Snape had used the last time. The gargoyle sprang aside, and the wall split to reveal a spiral staircase. "He hasn't even changed the password. Dumbledore's waiting for us," Matthew muttered inwardly. "Is sherbet lemon the password?" Harry asked. He had never been to the headmaster's office before. "After we came back from the Forbidden Forest that day, I followed Professor Snape here, and that was the word," Matthew answered. "I hear the password changes every so often." They climbed the spiral stairs and entered the office. Dumbledore was indeed there, seated behind his long desk. "Professor Dumbledore," Harry began at once and poured out everything that had just happened. Dumbledore listened kindly, nodding or asking gentle questions, as if he knew nothing and wanted to let them speak. When they reached Voldemort's fate, Harry said worriedly, "Professor, I think Voldemort may still be alive. He said he'd kill Senior Matthew and me. I think he escaped." Dumbledore's expression turned grave. "Yes, Harry, he is not truly dead. He has hidden himself again, perhaps searching for another body willing to share. He is not properly alive, so he cannot properly be killed. He sought the stone to restore himself. But he shall never have that chance again. Nicholas Flamel has decided to destroy the Philosopher's Stone. If he still wishes to return, he must find another way." Harry was stunned. "Destroy it? But Nicholas Flamel lives because of the stone, doesn't he?" Dumbledore smiled. "To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. He has laid aside enough elixir. When all is settled, he and his wife will set out upon a new journey." After a while, Harry realized the headmaster might wish to speak with Matthew alone and left for the hospital wing to visit Ron and the others. Matthew placed the Philosopher's Stone on the desk and said bluntly, "Professor, you were watching the whole time, weren't you?" "Every trial was set just within our abilities," Dumbledore replied. "So I drank the draught of living death," Matthew said. "Even if it had been poison, Professor Snape could have saved me." Dumbledore exclaimed admiringly. "Matthew, you saw through it." "Yes, I was watching, fortunate enough to witness that exquisite transfiguration. That trial was arranged by Professor Snape. He can reverse the partial living death, and knowing you would face Quirrell directly, he designed it so. Once the potion takes effect, your resistance to the dark arts increases greatly. Yet the draught must not be taken often. After a few consecutive days, the drinker becomes a permanent revenant," Dumbledore warned. Matthew nodded. Though it wasn't written in the recipe, he had already deduced as much back in the magic potion workshop. "Matthew, do you know why I arranged all this?" Dumbledore asked, his bright eyes fixed on the boy. "To build Harry's confidence, so he'll have the courage to face Voldemort," Matthew replied. That was the answer he had reached. A flicker of surprise crossed Dumbledore's blue eyes. "Matthew, you are even more mature than I thought." "Yes, Voldemort is not dead. Everyone knows, Harry Potter defeated Voldemort 10 years ago. One day he will seek Harry out. Harry must have the courage to meet him. But what I never expected was that you too would remain calm and brave in the face of Voldemort. Voldemort in this state is nothing to fear, Matthew said evenly. He is only a wolf stripped of its fangs. Dumbledore sighed. Indeed, but do not underestimate him. His present condition is strange. Even I cannot destroy him in his present state. Remap 109. Letter afterwards. In the headmaster's office, Matthew and Dumbledore stopped talking about what had just happened and spent some time exploring Transfiguration instead. Half an hour was enough for Matthew to feel he had benefited greatly. Combined with the Transfiguration notes Dumbledore had given him earlier, many key points suddenly made sense. That gave him more confidence in translating runic magic for Transfiguration. Professor, your knowledge is astonishing. May I ask you one more thing? Do you know what this is for? Matthew produced a small, exquisitely crafted Rubik's Cube. I found it while researching items left by my grandfather, Alfred Black. It seems to be connected to ancient runes. The cube had come from the antique box Matthew opened using the spell model as a key after he translated the runic script template for the Lumos charm. He had examined it for a long time without finding a clue. Even his grandfather's portrait didn't know what it was, only that the box itself was an artifact discovered in an ancient ruin. Dumbledore put on his glasses and studied the cube carefully. After a moment, he said slowly, "This is goblin workmanship. There's still some 30 fluctuation inside. It doesn't look merely decorative." I thought so too. Do you know what it's used for? Matthew asked, nodding. I've lived rather a long time, but there are still many things I do not know, Dumbledore replied with a gentle shake of his head. He took a sheet of stationery from his drawer, wrote half a page, and handed it to Matthew. Since it's goblin-made, the best course is to ask a goblin. Eureka Asgar is a goblin friend of mine. Give him this letter. He'll be happy to answer your questions. Matthew accepted the letter. Thank you, Professor. I appreciate it. Dumbledore smiled. It's nothing. Let's leave it there for today. I still have matters to attend to concerning the Philosopher's Stone. After saying goodbye, Matthew left the headmaster's office and mentally reviewed the conversation, finding nothing overlooked. He had revealed more of his strength recently, and that would draw attention. But after acquiring the Act 8 and the Wizard Tower, his outlook had shifted. Where once he aspired to be a great wizard like Dumbledore or Grindelwald, he now had the confidence to surpass them. Dumbledore had told Harry, only one who wanted to find the Philosopher's Stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Matthew understood that this was the core test Dumbledore had set for Harry, to see whether he had gone astray and whether he was worth continued investment. It was probably only the first in a long succession of tests. Matthew expected he would face many trials himself, but he did not fear them. Dumbledore would not lightly put a student in mortal danger. There was still time to grow. In the hospital wing, Ron muttered, "Stop shaking, my head's spinning," while lying on his bed. Neville slept on the bed beside him. Hermione paced anxiously in front of them. After bringing Neville and Ron out, she had sent an owl to Dumbledore to tell him Quirrell intended to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore had replied with a single line, "I already know." There had been no other news, and she had been waiting for Harry and Matthew to come out ever since, growing more anxious by the minute. Hermione looked up as footsteps approached, and a joyful smile spread across her face. "Harry, you had me worried to death." She rushed forward and hugged him tightly, then looked behind him. Not seeing Matthew, she asked, nervous, "Where's Matthew?" Harry rubbed his shoulder. Hermione's hug had been fierce, and said, "Matthew's fine. He's still in the headmaster's office." Both Hermione and a curious Ron breathed a sigh of relief. Hermione immediately peppered Harry with questions. "Is Professor Dumbledore back? What happened? Did you stop Quirrell? What about the stone?" Harry scratched his head and recounted the events. Hermione and Ron listened raptly. When they heard that Quirrell had snatched the Philosopher's Stone from the mirror of Erised, and that Matthew had defeated Quirrell, or rather Lord Voldemort, they couldn't help cheering. Their excitement drew Madame Pomfrey into the ward to warn them, but there were no other patients, so she didn't throw them out. After Madame Pomfrey left, Hermione sighed. I never expected you-know-who would possess Quirrell directly. Thank goodness we found Matthew, otherwise Harry might have had to face him alone. If that had happened, it would have been awful. Ron shuddered at the image. Harry's own unease lingered. He had seen the duel between Matthew and Voldemort. Though it ended quickly, the intensity had been far beyond anything he could have handled. He resolved to practice diligently and learn from Matthew. The transfiguration Matthew had displayed revealed to him the endless possibilities of Thurthray. That evening, the Great Hall buzzed more than usual. News travels fast. Students had heard, in one form or another, about Matthew's deeds, and every table chattered with speculation. The most exaggerated rumor claimed Matthew had defeated the professors. Because it was the weekend and some professors hadn't been seen all day, the gossip took on a life of its own. "Matthew, did you really beat Dumbledore?" Geralt called out as Matthew entered the hall. "Huh?" Matthew was stunned. A crowd quickly gathered, and Jerry squeezed in. "People are saying you defeated the professors." The faces around him mixed excitement, admiration, disbelief, and skepticism. Matthew was bewildered. How had the story grown like this? He answered honestly, "I only defeated Quirrell." A collective gasp swept through the students as if the air had been sucked out of the hall. Questions poured at him all at once, turning the noise chaotic. "How did you do it? What did Professor Quirrell do? I heard you block the killing curse. Senior Matthew, do you have time tonight?" 110. Personnel changes. Pop. Fireworks exploded overhead, cutting through the din in the Great Hall. Students turned toward the entrance, where Albus Dumbledore and several heads of house stood, unable to reach the platform because the aisles were clogged with students. "Blocking the way is unwise. Please return to your seats. Professor Dumbledore has an announcement," Professor McGonagall called. The pupils, curiosity warring with obedience, slid back into place. They could tell what Dumbledore was about to say would answer some of the questions buzzing through the room. When the path was clear, the group of teachers walked slowly to the high table. Dumbledore tapped his throat with a small, clear charm to carry his voice, then spoke in that unhurried, precise manner that made everyone stop talking. "A sad event has occurred," he said. "During the holidays last year, Professor Quirrell was cursed by the dark arts. The curse has steadily worn away at him, and his condition has grown worse. Driven by pain and desperation, he sought help from the very dark wizard who cursed him." Dumbledore did not name Lord Voldemort. He went on, "After the break-in at Gringotts, my old friend Nicholas Flamel entrusted the Philosopher's Stone to me for safekeeping, believing Hogwarts to be among the safest places in the world." "The Philosopher's Stone?" A ripple of surprised voices rose from the tables. Dumbledore raised his hands, palms down, until silence returned. "Having learned of the stone's presence here, the Dark Wizard devised a plan to seize it, and through Professor Quirrell, infiltrated Hogwarts. We set up many layers of protection, but the Dark Wizard still managed to bypass them and attempt to claim the stone." The hall held its breath. "Several brave, determined students discovered the conspiracy," Dumbledore continued. "I am proud of them. By their own efforts, and passing trial after trial, they prevented the theft of the stone and averted far worse consequences." He paused. "Now, a few points to award." "Ronald Weasley," Dumbledore began. Ron's face lit up. He had been released from the hospital wing that afternoon after taking his potion and rest. "For winning the most brilliant game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor 50 points. Gryffindor erupted, the table shaking with cheers. Percy, ever the prefect, stomped to his feet, bellowing, "That's my brother, my youngest brother. He survived Professor McGonagall's giant chessboard." Dumbledore smiled faintly and went on. "Hermione Granger, through logical deduction and careful observation, she discovered Quirrell's abnormality. 50 points to Gryffindor." Hermione's eyes were wet. She looked embarrassed and moved. The Gryffindors cheered again. "Neville Longbottom, he showed extraordinary courage. He trusted his friends and drank an unknown potion to get past one of the trials. 50 points to Gryffindor." Neville and Ron hugged, and Ron gave a small yelp when the movement tugged at his bandaging. More cheers. Gryffindor had already gained 150 points. Harry Potter, he displayed remarkable bravery and exceptional character. 60 points to Gryffindor. The table rose as one, clapping and working sums. With that 210-point surge, Gryffindor shot up from last place to the top of the standings, hope lighting every face. Dumbledore was not finished. Matthew Black, through superb potion-making skills, he solved the puzzle set by Professor Snape, and by masterful dueling, he defeated Quirrell and the Dark Wizard, protecting the Philosopher's Stone. 60 points to Slytherin. The Slytherin table erupted into thunderous applause. Slytherin reclaimed first place, but only by a slim margin over Gryffindor. The Gryffindors began urgent, excited calculations about how to overtake them before the House Cup was awarded. There was still time in the term. When the noise died down, Dumbledore continued. Although this attempt to steal the stone has been thwarted, my friend Nicholas Flamel has decided the stone must be destroyed to prevent further attempts by dark wizards. A collective gasp swept the hall. But the stone, voices protested. Dumbledore raised a hand. Also, since we have once again lost our defense against the dark arts professor, and it is too late to replace him for this term, Professor Severus Snape will serve as the defense against the dark arts instructor until the end of the school year. A small, inscrutable smirk flickered on Snape's usually sullen face, and nobody could tell whether it meant triumph or resignation. "Very well," Dumbledore said. "Let us begin our meal." He returned to his seat at the staff table, and the clatter of knives and forks rose as the feast resumed. At the Gryffindor table, the mood had shifted. Victory had slipped away nearly as fast as it had appeared. Ron buried his face in his hands. "That's worse than Quirrell teaching," he muttered. "At least Quirrell wouldn't take points off." Harry tried to look on the bright side. "Snape can still teach us useful things. Matthew said Snape is very skilled." Across the hall, Geralt had his arm over Matthew Black's shoulder, still stunned. "When did you get so powerful, enough to handle a troll and a dark wizard?" he demanded. Matthew gave a small laugh. "It just happened without me noticing." "Nice humble brag," Jerry teased, borrowing a phrase he'd learned from Matthew. "You're only saying that because you spoil your girlfriend every day," Geralt shot back. "Of course you can't learn proper dueling when you're always mooning over someone." Jerry rolled his eyes. "At least I have a girlfriend. You don't, and you're not as powerful as Matthew anyway." Among the three friends, Geralt's marks were the lowest, and the teasing continued good-naturedly. Matthew took a slow draught of mutton soup to steady his stomach. He had exerted himself more than he realized, and hunger finally caught up with him. Throughout the meal, fellow students came by to offer congratulations. They'd achieved something that seemed impossible. The story of a student besting a dark wizard and saving the Philosopher's Stone would be told for years to come. 2 months later, the Quidditch pitch was buzzing. Today's match between Slytherin and Ravenclaw was the final of this year's Hogwarts Quidditch Cup. A replay of the game that had been cut short before Christmas when the broom Matthew Black was riding exploded. At the time, Ravenclaw had been declared the winner, but the decision was made that the two teams would replay the match after the rest of the season finished. Now both Slytherin and Ravenclaw led the standings with 2 points each. Gryffindor and Hufflepuff had only 1 point apiece. After that accident, new pre-match rules had been added. Before every game, the referees would inspect every player's broom to prevent anything like that from happening again. In the stands, Geralt sat next to his Ravenclaw girlfriend, Lisa. He'd been acting oddly lately. He hadn't changed girlfriends in over half a year, which made his friends tease him mercilessly. "Geralt, want to make a bet? The loser has to write a diary entry 100 times over summer," Jerry shouted over the din. The crowd was loud and lively, so Geralt raised his voice. "Sure, I'm betting on Slytherin to win." Jerry rolled his eyes. "Matthew Black's playing. Do you even need to bet on Slytherin? Let's bet how many players Matthew Black can take out today. If neither of us gets it right, whoever's number is closest wins." Geralt hesitated, about to answer, when he felt a pinch at his waist from the person beside him. He instantly remembered his girlfriend was a Ravenclaw. Thinking fast and looking around as if to hide his maneuver, he changed his tune. "I think Ravenclaw's really strong this year. It could be a tight match. We should be rational about it." "Just tell me, how many?" Jerry pressed. Though the stands had been enchanted against heat, Geralt found himself sweating, and the hand on his waist tightened. He turned and saw Lisa's gentle smile. Giving up, he forced a sheepish grin. "All right, I'll say Matthew Black won't take anyone out today." Jerry flashed a triumphant grin. "Then I'll bet he takes out one player." So Jerry would win if Matthew eliminated one or more opponents. Gerald shot him a look. "You're setting me up, aren't you?" Jerry shot one back. "That's revenge for you, always showing off with your girlfriend." Lisa clapped. "Look, it's starting!" When the referees finished inspecting the brooms, they were returned to the players in the locker rooms. The commentator took his place in the booth high above the pitch. Lee Jordan's high-pitched voice still did the honors, while the referee's table was flanked by two professors. Professor Snape, head of Slytherin, and Professor Phileas Flitwick, head of Ravenclaw. Lee announced enthusiastically, "The final Quidditch match of the semester is about to begin. The winner of this match will take the championship and etch their house's name into the school's history. Let's see who will claim that honor." Players from both teams strode out of the locker rooms and waved to the stands. Entering the field first, the Ravenclaw team. The Ravenclaws have been solid this year. After an early loss to Hufflepuff, they regrouped and stuck to a very disciplined defensive strategy, winning every match since. Cheers greeted the Ravenclaw players. And now, the Slytherin team. Slytherin's long been a powerhouse. Their only loss this year was that unfinished match against Ravenclaw. Their attack is relentless, and with Matthew Black, they finally have the missing piece, an unstoppable fast break. Today's a duel between spear and shield. Will Slytherin's spear shatter Ravenclaw's shield, or will Ravenclaw's defense break the spear? I can't wait. The crowd's roar rose to a fever pitch. Madame Hooch stood in the center of the pitch, tossed the quaffle high into the air, and blew her silver whistle. The players launched into the sky. This time, a Ravenclaw chaser snatched the quaffle first. Lee Jordan called it out. The match has begun, and the Ravenclaw chaser has taken the initiative. The Slytherin chasers aren't very good at seizing the initiative, which is a real problem for a fast break team. The two Slytherin chasers are in pursuit. They're accelerating to flank her from both sides. But the Ravenclaw chaser eased off the throttle. She held the quaffle in one hand and lightly pulled back on her broom's handle. Her speed dropped dramatically. The two Slytherin chasers closed in and tried to sandwich her, but both missed. They had to yank on their broom handles to avoid colliding, and the Ravenclaw chaser quickly adjusted course, slipped past them, and sprinted toward the goal hoops. Lee was excited. Wow, she really did slow on purpose. By decelerating and shifting position, she just broke through the Slytherin block. She's closing in on the goalposts, too fast for the keeper to reach it in time. I didn't expect the Ravenclaw team, known for its defense, to score so early. The Ravenclaw chaser felt a brief surge of triumph as the empty goalpost rushed toward her. She had timed it perfectly. At the start of a match, the chasers and keeper take off from the center. So if you grab the quaffle first and choose a goal fast enough, a keeper might not make it back in time. She was unstoppable until a sharp whistling sound cut through the air behind her. I anticipated your prediction. I anticipated your prediction. Slytherin's keeper is racing back to the goalposts as fast as he can, but he's too late to get back on defense. Ravenclaw's chaser is about to score. Wait, there's a bludger behind her. Just as the Ravenclaw chaser was about to throw, she heard a sharp whistle at her back. She dodged decisively to the side, and a bludger zoomed through the space where her golden ponytail had just been. She saw it. Just a hair's breadth of movement to avoid it. She hasn't lost her chance to shoot yet. Something's wrong. Why did she slam on the brakes? The Ravenclaw chaser let out a quiet breath of relief. Her sensitive ears had picked up the bludger too late to see it safely, but soon enough to avoid being knocked off her broom. From the corner of her eye, she caught another bludger coming in from the side. She quickly judged the distance and pulled hard on her broom to brake, but the momentum carried her into a short skid. The speeding bludger struck the arm she used to grip the quaffle. Pain made her fingers loosen, and the pursuing Slytherin chaser pounced, snatching the ball. Her movement had been predicted. She rubbed the sore spot where she'd been hit. Quidditch padding protected the vital areas and softened the blow. Hurt, but not injurious. She glared at Matthew. who had sent that bludger. She had been that close to scoring. Matthew just waved with a smile and ignored her, angling his broom toward the bludgers. In raw reaction time for intercepts and getting to the action first, the Ravenclaw chasers were usually faster than Slytherins. Ravenclaw's strategy relied on that. Instead of immediately chasing the quaffle, their chasers shadowed the opposition, looking for chances to block paths, slow down scoring, and create openings. But Slytherin's beaters were better than Ravenclaw's. Matthew and his fellow beater had taken control of both bludgers early. With his partner's help, Matthew had blocked the Ravenclaw chaser's route and enabled his teammate to seize the quaffle. "Lee Jordan," someone shouted. "It's Matthew's bludger." He predicted the opponent's move. He's playing 3 steps ahead, predicted your prediction. Is he that bold? If the opponent hadn't braked hard, wouldn't she have dodged it? Matthew has once again set up his teammate with the quaffle. Now it's Slytherin's turn to attack. The Ravenclaw beaters are being run ragged. They haven't even touched a bludger yet. They're just trailing Matthew and breathing his broom's exhaust. If brooms had exhaust, that is. Slytherin's captain, Marcus Flint, streaked toward the Ravenclaw goal with the quaffle. 2 Ravenclaw chasers tried to chase him down, but were kept at bay by the positioning of Slytherin's other chasers. Seeing an opening, Ravenclaw's keeper pushed toward his own goalposts, only to be struck in the midsection by a bludger from a distance. The bludger slammed into him, sending him spinning and flipping through the air. He clung to his broom tight with every ounce of experience, preventing a fall that could have taken him out of the match. His abdomen throbbed from the hit. Slytherin's captain, Marcus, is approaching the goalposts. He's shaken off those trying to block him. The Ravenclaw keeper needs to get back on defense. My God, the Ravenclaw keeper has been knocked away by a bludger. He flipped several times. Thankfully, he didn't fall from the sky. Otherwise, Ravenclaw might have lost their keeper right after the start. It's Matthew again. He intercepted the Ravenclaw keeper in advance. He can't make it back. Congratulations to Slytherin for the first goal of the match. The stands erupted. Even though Marcus actually scored, the crowd chanted, "Black!" Marcus didn't care. Winning was what mattered. Having a strong teammate made that easier. He flew over, high-fived Matthew and laughed. Nice pass. He turned toward his teammates, pumping a fist. Slytherin will win. Keep it up. Slytherin found its rhythm and pressed the attack harder. A Ravenclaw chaser had barely caught the quaffle before 2 Slytherin chasers closed in and forced a hurried pass. The airborne quaffle was then knocked down by a bludger. Marcus swooped in, scooped up the loose quaffle, and flew to an undefended hoop, scoring again. The Ravenclaw keeper still hadn't fully recovered. The blow to his abdomen from earlier was still sharp in his mind, and he'd been caught off guard by the speed of the play. Lee Jordan's commentary grew more animated. What is this? Matthew actually used a bludger to bat down a pass. That's a move you only see in professional matches. This is worth the price of admission. We're actually watching a match like this for free today. His aim with the bludger is just ridiculous. Matthew truly deserved last year's best beater. This year, he's only adding to that legend. This goal could be one of this year's top 10 Quidditch moments. No, I bet this year's top 10 will all be Matthew. Thunderous applause rolled through the stands. Even the Gryffindors, who normally jeered Slytherin, clapped. Respect for strength wins over house rivalries. Slytherin players streamed over, slapping Matthew's back, bumping fists, giving thumbs up. My touch is pretty good today, Matthew said with a grin. In truth, it was thanks to his alchemical device. Bludgers, quaffles, even the golden snitch carried subtle magical fluctuations. His device let him sense those shifts precisely, moving across the pitch like a fish in water. Great play. That was brilliant, Marcus called. Keep it up. Crush them. After the restart, Matthew accelerated again. He wanted to thin their numbers. A blitz burned stamina, but if he could snowball the lead quickly, the opponents would only have energy enough to flounder and be ground down. No sooner had Matthew knocked one bludger away than another came rocketing at him. Lee Jordan shrieked over the commentary. What is Slytherin doing? Why aim the bludger at Matthew? Could it be? Matthew flicked his bat and sent the second bludger spinning off course. 2 bludgers had been turned aside in quick succession. He had briefed his teammates before the game. The other beater would feed him, launch bludgers into his path so he could volley them. Matthew's real target was the Ravenclaw chaser, who had been disrupting Marcus's positioning. During play, a keeper may be targeted only in an offensive phase. With Slytherin not in attack, beaters couldn't legally strike the opposing keeper, so Matthew aimed for the chaser. The two bludgers flashed toward Ravenclaw's chaser. Marcus had read Matthew's plan. He held his watch. The moment the bludger left Matthew's bat, Marcus tugged his broom handle and dropped his speed sharply. Most of the chaser's attention was fixed on Marcus. She didn't see what was coming until her blonde ponytail captain barked, "Anna, get out of the way!" Her reflexes were lightning fast. She swerved, and one bludger whistled past her shoulder. But before she could recover, a sharp pain lanced through her waist and she tumbled from her broom. She hit the ground and was carried off by the medics, out of the contest. Lee Jordan bellowed, "A double-team strike." Matthews pulled off another pro-level move. Remember, bludgers fly fast. Catching and re-hitting in one go is almost impossible. Is this really Matthew? One surprise after another. I can barely breathe. Ravenclaw's remaining chaser managed to slip one through the hoops, but they'd foreseen the exchange and accepted the loss. In the stands, Jerry stomped, clapping wildly, and nudged Geralt. "I win." When he looked up, he found Lisa burying her face against Geralt's chest, distraught. Geralt ignored Jerry's murderous glare and patted Lisa's back. "It's all right. Ravenclaw still has a chance." Ravenclaw loses another player. They can't hold off Matthew's onslaught at all. The score is 20-40. After two early goals, Slytherin hasn't scored again, and Ravenclaw pulled ahead. But with the last chaser down, Ravenclaw has no hope left, only able to watch the deficit shrink. Unless their seeker grabs the golden snitch. Yet Ravenclaw's seeker is boxed in by Slytherin's seeker, and two chasers, no way through, no chance at the snitch. Wow, Ravenclaw's keeper is down too. Ravenclaw is routed. They can only watch helplessly as Slytherin keeps scoring. Lee Jordan was on his feet in the commentary box, face flushed, so fired up he sounded like he wanted to leap onto the pitch himself. Slytherin's seeker has the golden snitch, 150 points to Slytherin. The score freezes at 306-40. Game over. Congratulations to Slytherin, winners of this year's Hogwarts Quidditch Cup. And let's congratulate Matthew Black. His name will be carved into Hogwarts history forever. Thank you, Matthew Black, for this spectacular match. You've pushed the beater position to its absolute peak. Without doubt, you've claimed best beater again. No, not just best beater. This year's best Quidditch player will surely be Matthew Black's as well. The roar from the stands drowned everything on the pitch. The moment Matthew landed, teammates swarmed him. He sensed trouble. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" "Why, thanking our MVP, of course." Marcus grinned, signaled, and the others hoisted Matthew high into the air. Spectators rushed the pitch. Confetti cannons and bouquets appeared. High above the crowd, Matthew was buried in streamers and flowers as fans began a synchronized chant that rolled across the Quidditch pitch like a tide. Black, black, black. The match was over. Term was winding down and exams were beginning. With the Hogwarts Quidditch Cup won, Slytherin awarded itself another 50 points. Their lead widened dramatically, putting them far ahead of second-place Ravenclaw. After the Philosopher's Stone incident, Dumbledore had bumped Gryffindor into second, and the Lions dreamed of catching Slytherin. Instead, Gryffindor's total not only failed to rise but kept slipping. Restless and undisciplined, they fell back to fourth. Chiefly responsible were the Weasley twins. With Matthew's sponsorship, they caused one uproar after another, and each incident steadily added to Gryffindor's point deductions. "Why you?" Fred Weasley aimed his wand at the figure opposite him, face suddenly grave. "Why not me?" Matthew replied mildly, wand relaxed at his side. Fred's confident smirk crumbled. "How can a final exam be like this?" Matthew smiled. "How should I know?" He had suggested to the temporary Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Snape, that most students' practical skills were too weak and proposed adding more live duel content. Professor Snape had agreed wholeheartedly and adopted the idea. 114. Award Ceremony. Professor Snape had been in a very good mood lately. He had finally gotten his wish. He was teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts. At Matthew Black's suggestion, Snape had added practical combat sessions to the class. The final grade was split, 60% from the written exam, 40% from practical duels. What was happening now was the practical duel portion of the final. If you want to chat, stay behind and help me clean ingredients. If not, hurry up, there are many more people waiting to duel, Professor Snape urged. To be safe, the duels were held under his supervision. Matthew Black signaled with his eyes for Fred Weasley to attack first. Fred braced himself, then the corners of his mouth twitched into a smirk. "Don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time," he said. After this stretch of practical classes, everyone had a clear impression of Matthew Black's strength. Fred was no exception. He knew full well there was a yawning gap between them and that he had no chance by normal means. He pulled a black sphere from his robes and hurled it toward Matthew. Matthew waved his wand lazily, and a nearby chair transformed into a wooden board, batting the sphere aside. When the board struck the black orb, it exploded in a thick cloud of smoke that quickly filled the classroom. "Trying to block my vision?" Matthew chuckled. "It's useless. Fred." Then he realized something was off. Through his magical senses, he felt Fred pulling out a large, crude alchemical contraption. Fred's voice came from inside the smoke, crackling with excitement. "Taste this. The latest from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Dung Bomb. Gatling version." The classroom was filled with a rat-a-tat of sound like a Gatling gun. Matthew's expression hardened and he cast a shield charm, wrapping himself in a semi-transparent spherical barrier. He soon discovered that only a few dung bombs were flying his way. Fred was strafing the crowd of spectators. From the moment Fred had been called up, it was clear he had no intention of taking the exam seriously. He was here to advertise his newest product. The classroom descended into chaos. Screams and curses mixed with coughing and gagging. "It stinks," someone yelled. "Fred, aim better. You hit me." "Ah!" Fred's audacity was astounding. He was genuinely unrepentant. Even Matthew couldn't stand the stench. He waved his wand and conjured a gust of wind that dispersed the fog. Once the smoke cleared, Matthew saw the watching students in total disarray, covered, coughing, furious. He flicked his wand again, and the chair behind Fred turned into a vine that wrapped him up. Snape's face was livid, his eyes burning with anger. He, however, had also cast a shield charm, so he and the students closest to him had been spared the worst of it. "Fred Weasley, what are you doing?" Professor Snape roared. "Have you had your brains replaced with dung water?" "This is a final exam," Fred said, grinning and utterly unconcerned. Snape's anger flared hotter at the smug look. 50 points from Gryffindor, he snapped. To prevent Snape from having a fit, Matthew waved his wand. The dung bombs that clung to the spectators turned into stones and fell away. Those already on the floor likewise became stone. "Transfiguration?" Someone breathed. Such a large-scale, precise transfiguration stunned the students. Even Snape was taken aback. Matthew's skill with transfiguration was beyond anything he'd expected. Snape pulled out his notebook and, after Fred's name, wrote a T, the grade rumored to befit only a troll. Then, after Matthew Black's name, he marked an O for outstanding. "Next pair," he muttered. Exam week ended, and today was the House Cup award ceremony. The Great Hall was packed and buzzing. "We've got our 7th consecutive win, haven't we?" Jerry said, sipping black tea to moisten his throat. They'd been chatting for a while. Beside him, Gerald had dark circles under his eyes and looked exhausted. He'd been up late every night, cramming for exams. "I suppose so," Matthew said, not entirely sure. This was Harry Potter's first year, after all. The Philosopher's Stone incident was over, and thanks to the Weasley twins, Gryffindor had slipped in the standings. Dumbledore had no obvious reason to grant extra points to Gryffindor. Dumbledore rose and walked to the podium. "The exams are over, the term is over, and ahead of you, the whole summer holiday," he said kindly. Students applauded. Who didn't look forward to summer? Once the cheering died down, Dumbledore continued, "Now we will proceed with the House Cup ceremony. The scores for each house are as follows. Slytherin House is in first place with a massive lead of 612 points. Therefore, the winner of this year's House Cup is Slytherin." Dumbledore clapped, and the decorations above shifted to Slytherin's green and silver. A huge banner, emblazoned with a snake, unfurled on the wall behind the high table. A thunderous cheer rose from Slytherin's table. Dumbledore held up his hand for silence, then produced a crystal trophy. Next, we will present an award related to Quidditch, he announced. This award requires nomination by the deans of the 4 houses and must receive votes from more than half the students. It has not been awarded for at least 10 years. Every recipient has gone on to become an excellent professional Quidditch player. This award is the Hogwarts Quidditch Cup, Best Quidditch Player. The winner is Matthew Black. Cheers and applause erupted from every table. The award was well-deserved. As the students applauded, they all watched Matthew closely. They had deliberately kept the vote a secret from him. 115. Luna's intuition. Matthew had been surprised. The Quidditch Cup Awards had taken place well before exams, and he'd assumed the ceremony was over. He had collected the Championship Cup and the Beater of the Year trophy, and had thought the Best Quidditch Player prize wouldn't be awarded. It turned out that that particular honor required a student vote. He rose from his seat and crossed to the podium. Dumbledore handed him the crystal trophy and gave his shoulder a friendly pat. "I hope to see you in professional matches one day." "Thank you, Professor," Matthew replied with a smile. He had played Quidditch at Hogwarts partly to build a reputation among his classmates. Once he'd graduated, he supposed he would have less reason to seek that kind of prestige. He turned the crystal cup in his hands. The design was elegant. 2 bludgers spiraled up the stem, and the engraving read, "Best Quidditch Player, Matthew Black, awarded this honor in 1992. The holidays began, and Matthew went home to their house in Ottery St. Catchpole. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the kind of tidy that came from frequent, careful attention. A sycamore tree stood at one corner of the yard, full of leaves that seemed to keep their own quiet histories. A birdhouse built of wooden boards hung high on a branch. It hadn't been used in a while, but it was still sturdy. He pushed the front door open, and Preserved Egg, his black cat, shot into the house with a practiced dash underfoot. Matthew opened a few windows to let in fresh air. Even though the place had been unoccupied, the magic broom's scheduled cleanings had kept dust at bay. He waved his wand and cast Scourgify over the tables and chairs. He preferred the Scourgify spell to using ordinary cleaning rags, which always seemed to leave his desk messier than before. Preserved Egg ran through the rooms like a little lord inspecting his estate, weaving around furniture and purring in satisfaction. Housework done by magic was quick, and Matthew soon had everything arranged to his liking. He started preparing dinner. A clear, slightly otherworldly voice came from outside. "Matthew, are you home?" Luna, he knew that voice anywhere. "I didn't tell you I was coming back today. How did you know?" Luna stepped into the yard. She wore dirigible plum earrings and a cork necklace as usual, and now a delicate bracelet of pale feathers. Luna's fingers toyed with it as she spoke. "The mistletoe tree in front of my house has blossomed," she said, blinking. "I thought something good would happen today, so I came to see." Matthew scratched his head. Luna had a strange, unerring intuition about small things, an inclination that often led to fortunate coincidences. He smiled. "Let's go see Puff Puff," she said, taking his hand. Puff Puff was the thunderbird Luna had raised. She named him for the noise he'd made as a chick. Before they left, Matthew shouted back into the house, "Preserved Egg, make an extra portion for dinner." The cat gave him a disdainful look. He had to do the cooking, after all. But in truth, Preserved Egg wasn't just any cat. Over the past year, he'd managed a few stunts with magic, learned some ancient runes and basic runic magic, and his meditation practice had pushed him close to qualifying as a second-level wizard apprentice. Matthew suspected he'd taught the cat a convenient little spell called the Invisible Hand to get more domestic help out of him. Luna walked them up the hill where several caves cut into the rock. "Puff Puff's growing so fast," she said as they climbed. "After Christmas, he outgrew the birdhouse on the sycamore, so I moved him to a cave." They reached a cave with a wide, warm interior. The nest inside showed evidence of careful repairs. Luna had clearly thought about her design. "Puff Puff's out," she announced. The Thunderbird wasn't in the nest. Luna cupped her hands around her mouth and called, "Puff Puff." Wings beat in the distance. A great pale gold bird descended, larger than an elephant. Its shape was unlike any ordinary bird. 3 pairs of wings, the largest pair where its shoulders met its body, and 2 smaller pairs nearer its legs and tail. For all its size, it moved with a certain grace. When it saw Matthew, its sharp eyes shone with puzzled recognition. It felt familiarity, but couldn't quite place him. "Puff, Puff, don't you remember Matthew?" Luna said, rubbing the Thunderbird's belly. "Matthew was here when you hatched." Puff Puff had only hatched the previous year, and his earliest memories were faint. He didn't remember Matthew clearly, but he was clever and understood Luna's meaning. He nudged his head against Matthew's hand. "I said in a letter that Puff Puff mainly eats meat now," Matthew said, fishing a piece of smoked meat from his pocket. The Thunderbird accepted it eagerly and nuzzled him when it was finished. Matthew produced another large chunk, which Puff Puff gobbled, then rubbed his head again in thanks. After Puff Puff molted, his feathers got very tough. "No good for scarves anymore," Luna mused, sitting on a rock and watching them with a bright smile. "The scarf you gave me was woven from the feathers he shed. The bracelet I'm wearing is from his belly feathers." Matthew stroked the bird's neck where the feathers felt coarse and strong. He looked at Luna, her pale eyes partly hidden beneath those crescent-shaped lids, and said softly, "It suits you." Puff Puff bobbed his head and looked between them. "He's inviting you to ride," Luna explained. The temptation was immediate. Matthew clambered onto the Thunderbird's broad back and reached down to help Luna up beside him. There was more than enough room for both of them. Puff Puff beat his great wings and rose, carrying them into the open sky. They circled the countryside as the light softened. The air smelled of cold leaves and distant sea. After a few wide, slow laps, the day slipped into evening. Stars pricked the darkening dome as Puff Puff glided them back toward the hill. Preserved egg had the table laid when they arrived, and the kitchen smelled good. The cat had grumbled about being made to cook, but his skills were not to be underestimated. Whatever his complaints, he had prepared a satisfying meal. The 3 of them, 2 humans and 1 fastidious black cat, sat around the table and ate, warm and content. Several days later, high above Cornwall, a large, pale golden bird soared through the sky. "Matthew, do you see the village?" the girl on the bird's back asked, pointing toward a cluster of dwellings below. "That should be it. Find somewhere to land, Puff Puff." The dark-haired boy patted the bird's neck. They were Matthew and Luna. Over the past few days, they had often taken Puff Puff out for joyrides, and Matthew had become very familiar with the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird gave a clear, long cry, flapped its wings, and banked toward the ground. Matthew and Luna were protected by 28, so there was no danger of being thrown off. Before long, Puff Puff settled on a nearby hillside. Matthew waved his hand, and the vegetation underfoot rose up, forming a ramp to the Thunderbird's back. The 2 of them descended to the ground. "Puff Puff, wait here," Luna said, running her hand along the bird's belly. The Thunderbird lowered its head and nudged her in agreement. "I've cast a disillusionment charm on Puff Puff, so don't worry about it being noticed," Matthew added. A short while later, they reached the village at the mountain's base. Weeds choked the paths, most of the wooden houses had collapsed, animal tracks scarred the yards. It looked as if no one had lived here for a long time. Matthew had come to visit the Goblin Village. The dilapidated settlement on the surface was only a disguise. He found a stone tablet in the village center and pressed a small amount of 28 into a seam in the stone. The tablet split down the middle and a dark crack opened, revealing a passage. "It's a bit like the entrance to Diagon Alley," Luna observed, curious. "Your instinct is right," Matthew said. "This is the same kind of 28, a variant of a portkey. In the Middle Ages, wizards invented these to hide entrances. They can turn ordinary objects into doors leading elsewhere." He had learned that from historical sources while researching ancient magic and ancient runes. He studied the magic on the passage for a moment, then continued, "But this door probably doesn't open into the ordinary world. It leads into a magical space created by 28, like an extension charm." Before he acquired the Wizard Tower, Matthew had considered establishing a secret base in the wizarding world and had studied these doorway 28s carefully so he could tell the difference. They stepped through the crack and emerged on a street paved with dark yellow stones. "What are you doing here?" a voice demanded. They were spotted almost immediately. A bearded goblin stepped forward. Goblins with beards were rare and unexpected. His look was unconventional. "We're here to see Mr. Asgar," Matthew said. The goblin's expression sharpened with suspicion. "Why are you looking for Bask?" "Professor Dumbledore recommended we come. We heard Mr. Asgar is a master of goblin alchemy, and I would like him to appraise an alchemical artifact, goblin craft," Matthew explained. He meant the goblin-made 28 cube he'd brought. He had already had it examined at the alchemy workshop in the Wizard Tower. The report suggested the cube might be some kind of key. He had searched the records but found nothing. Since the cube was tied to ancient magic, Matthew was naturally eager to learn more. "Dumbledore, so you're students from Hogwarts. Asgar is my father. Follow me." The goblin stroked his beard. "I am not called Bearded," he added when Luna's gaze lingered. "My name is Eureka Asgar. Folks usually call me Little Asgar or just Eureka." "Luna Lovegood," Luna said in that same ethereal, otherworldly tone. "The editor-in-chief of the Quibbler is my father." "Lovegood, the editor-in-chief of the Quibbler. Eureka paused, surprised and thoughtful. "Are you young for a goblin?" Luna's question had been half curiosity. The goblin looked a little taken aback. "Although I have a beard, I'm not yet an adult." Eureka glanced at them and then explained, "Goblins live a long time, 300 or 400 years. We aren't considered adults until 50. So I'm 39. Matthew studied Eureka's face and noticed that, aside from the beard, his features were quite young. "Don't stare at me. It's rude," Eureka muttered. "Sorry. My name is Matthew Black," Matthew said, offering a hand. Eureka's eyes lit up. "Matthew Black? I know your name. I saw it in the Daily Prophet today. You won the Best Quidditch Player trophy." Matthew took the paper from Eureka. The headline was indeed about his award. He hadn't expected the ceremony to be covered, since no reporters had turned up. He handed the paper back. "Do you read the newspapers a lot?" "Of course," Eureka replied, very pleased. "I like Quidditch. Could I have your autograph? You'll get offers from professional teams after you graduate." He rummaged in his pocket and produced 18 and a quill, already poised. Matthew scratched his head at the unexpected request from a goblin, then smiled and signed. Eureka accepted the autograph with obvious satisfaction, convinced Matthew would one day become a world-class player and that his signature would be worth a small fortune. 117, Fairy Alchemy Master. "We're here. This is my home," the bearded goblin said, gesturing at the house before them. Like the other buildings in the goblin village, it was decorated with gold and silver trim. Even the bricks had a dark gold sheen. They weren't actually made of precious metals, just colored that way. Goblins preferred to collect gold and silver, not use them as building materials. "Old man," the bearded goblin called as he opened the door. He certainly had a way with words. "Too noisy. I'm not seeing anyone," a grumpy voice replied from inside. Matthew and Luna exchanged glances. If the son was like this, the father was bound to be worse. The bearded goblin strode into the house, and Matthew and Luna followed quietly. He led them straight to the room on the right. "They were recommended by Dumbledore, Hogwarts students," he announced. "Dumbledore?" A white-bearded goblin with gold-rimmed spectacles and a poker face emerged from the room. "Mr. Asgar, I am Matthew Black. This is the letter Dumbledore asked me to give you." Matthew handed him the note. Baskin read it once. "It seems Dumbledore has found another promising talent. The spirit of magic truly favors humans." He adjusted his glasses and looked Matthew over carefully. "From the House of Black, too. That's rare these past 10 years. It was rare. Most of the Black heirs were in Azkaban, and Matthew was the only Black still active in the magical world." "Bring out what you want identified," Baskin said. Matthew took the goblin-crafted Rubik's Cube from his pocket. Baskin turned it over in his hands, frowning. It appears to be a vault key. Follow me." Baskin led them into a back room, an alchemy workshop cluttered with instruments, jars, and shelves of old books. "Don't touch anything. If you get hurt, I won't help you," he warned. "I'm old. My memory isn't what it used to be. I haven't seen one of these in a long time. I need to confirm it." He pulled several reference volumes from the shelf and consulted them. After a while, he nodded. "It is indeed a vault key. But, young Black, where did you get this?" "You know the House of Black never had a vault built by goblins," Matthew said. Baskin snorted. A vault is a place we goblins make to store things. Different vaults are for different things. This type, he tapped the key, is for storing information. I don't know how the blacks came by it, but I won't take the key from you. The vaults themselves are built by goblins. You can copy information out of them, but the original must remain in goblin care. Matthew thought for a moment and agreed. A vault key meant nothing without the vault, and if the vault only held records, copies would suffice. So where is this vault? He asked. The coordinates aren't on the key itself, Baskin said. You need a vault coordinate instrument to extract them. He leaned toward his son and whispered, Eureka, go to Lankrock and get the vault coordinate instrument. The words were meant to be quiet, but before long, Eureka came back carrying a black box. A bald goblin followed him in, looking sour. Baskin placed the Rubik's Cube key onto the black box and pressed several buttons. Goblin script scrolled across its surface. Baskin read it aloud and translated for Matthew. Somerset, England. Not too far. He wrote down the precise coordinates and handed the paper to his son. Eureka, you go with them to retrieve the information. All right, old man. Eureka's eyes shone with curiosity. He had never been to a vault. The bald goblin, meanwhile, eyed Matthew and said, Baskin, I heard you got a vault key? It's not mine, Baskin replied. This young black brought it. It's for an information vault. The bald goblin studied Matthew, then shrugged. When you retrieve the information, remember to share a copy with me. With that, he turned and left. Baskin stroked his beard. Don't mind him. He had a grudge against one of your black ancestors. Matthew merely shrugged. The House of Black left behind both useful connections and grudges. Baskin placed the coordinates in Eureka's hand. Take him. He's eager. We came on a thunderbird, Matthew said. Eureka's eyes widened and he smacked his lips. That's a magical creature the American Ministry of Magic forbids private ownership of, he exclaimed. Thunderbirds are native to North America, Arizona mostly, Baskin added, nodding. The American Ministry can regulate what it likes, but not here. Matthew smiled. Besides, we're in England. There's no law here against keeping a thunderbird. Eureka's excitement grew. He'd never ridden one. Take me with you, he pleaded. 118, Despicable Hellbow. A thunderbird carrying 2 humans and a goblin on its back flew over Somerset, England. Somerset lay just east of Devon, not far from Ottery St. Catchpole, where Matthew lived. At the thunderbird's speed, it didn't take long to reach their destination. Wow, this is amazing, the bearded goblin, Eureka Asgard, gushed, visibly thrilled. Faster than a flying broomstick. Are we going the right way? We're about to fly out of Somerset, Luna reminded them. Let me see. Still craving the rush, Eureka pulled a slip of paper with coordinates from his pocket and checked it. We passed it. It's right in that dried-up riverbed we just flew over. Matthew patted Puff Puff's neck and pointed. Puff Puff understood and angled its wings. Moments later, they landed at the riverbed, which had once carried water but now lay exposed, the channel dry. Eureka produced a vault key and fitted it into a small disc, an instrument that could find a vault entrance at close range. The disc blinked to life, projecting a faint magical indicator that pointed to the riverbed. It looks like the vault was built in the riverbed and was exposed when the river dried up, Eureka said. They walked a short distance along the channel and found traces of construction, a half-meter-high circular platform with a groove in its center. Eureka placed the vault key into the groove. With a soft click, the key glowed blue. Something in the platform activated, and luminous lines ran out into the earth. For an instant, the world around Matthew shifted violently. When he steadied himself, the scenery had changed. The sky was the same, but the riverbed had vanished. Instead, they stood in a place filled with giant stone statues, countless serpents carved in stone. So many snakes, Luna said, running a hand along one of the statues. These aren't ordinary snakes, they're basilisks. Matthew knew basilisks well. He had dissected one before. Surrounded by the towering stone serpents, he felt the uncanny impression of having arrived in the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts. Eureka beamed. Goblin magic is that impressive. Books and records are the hardest things to preserve for long periods, he went on. The library we built is an independent space. When it's hidden, the space seals itself completely, as if time stopped. Of course, it's not a true time stop. Living things can't survive inside, Eureka added, but it's perfect for storing books and records. At the center of the basilisk statues was an empty pool. One of the stone basilisks opened its mouth like a fountain, and water flowed into the basin. The pool filled, and the surface reflected a space that was entirely different from the one above. Eureka pointed at it. "That's the entrance to the library. I'll go in first." Eureka jumped into the pool, and when he landed, he was already inside the reflected space. With so many basilisk statues around, Matthew's unease grew. Whoever had built this library might well have been a dark wizard. "Luna, stay out here and keep an eye on Puff Puff. I'll go in with Eureka Asgar and take a look," Matthew said. "I'll take Puff Puff to the orchard to find something to eat," Luna replied. "I saw an orchard when we landed. Don't go far. If you run into any muggles, just ride Puff Puff away and wait for me to handle it when I come out." Matthew nodded and jumped in. He didn't feel wet. Instead, the world seemed to flip. When he came to himself, he was in a sealed chamber lined with bookshelves, shelves full of more volumes than many pureblood family libraries. Eureka was already browsing through the stacks. Matthew pulled a book from a shelf and tested it cautiously with a spell. A face of black mist erupted from the pages and roared at him, proof that his caution was well-founded. In much of their history, witches and wizards had protected written knowledge with jinxes to stop others from stealing secrets, a habit that faded only after finite incantatem was invented. "Finite incantatem," Matthew barked, pointing his wand. The shadowy face dissolved instantly. The presence of such protective jinxes suggested the books had been sealed away for at least 500 or 600 years, dating them to the era around the invention of finite incantatem. Eureka, meanwhile, seemed to have a way of dealing with the book's defenses that didn't involve a wand. He worked efficiently through the shelves while Matthew continued to inspect the volumes. Matthew opened one to have a quick look and found he couldn't tear his eyes away. Basilisk breeding methods. He almost laughed at the bluntness of it. The author listed on the title page was Herpo the Foul, notorious for breeding the world's first basilisk and for being among the earliest makers of Horcruxes. Herpo's work had focused on magical creatures, the soul, and the dark arts. As Matthew flipped through a dozen more books, many of them bore Herpo's name. Could this library belong to Herpo? He wondered. But when he moved to another shelf, he found the books there were by different authors. It became clear that the collection was organized by subject. The shelf he had just examined contained research on modifying magical creatures, while the one he was looking at now was primarily spellcraft. Matthew felt both unease and fascination settle over him as he wandered the stacks, realizing the depth and danger of the knowledge hidden here. 119. Giant snakes surged. Matthew and the bearded goblin packed the materials, planning to copy everything once they returned. Matthew thought the room contained only books until he noticed something odd on one shelf. When he took a volume down, he found a dried fungus stuck beneath it. Its cap was a tangle of deep red threads like jellyfish tentacles, and its stem bore regular, patterned ridges. "This is a..." Matthew had seen 20s in the wizarding world. They need void power to grow and usually appear in the endless void. The Gap world, closely linked to the wizarding world, is saturated with void power, so finding a 20 there wouldn't be surprising. But this was the Hogwarts world, and Matthew had never encountered a 20 here. Outside a finished world, the endless void is everywhere, yet a complete world has the levels that block void power. If void power shows up inside such a world, there are only two explanations. Either someone from the world has learned to travel between worlds and brought back void-related things, or a 12 has targeted the world. Matthew could travel between worlds, but he'd never been here before, so he hadn't left the fungus. If a 12 had targeted this world, Matthew felt uneasy. A 12 capable of breaking 11s would be extraordinarily powerful, and some could even devour entire worlds. On the other hand, the books on the shelf were warded with curses, showing they'd been stored for at least 500 or 600 years, so this quantile had to be at least that old. If a 12 had been gnawing at the world for centuries and still hadn't fully eroded the leaven, then it probably wasn't at the level of devouring worlds. The books on the shelf were all about ancient runes, but several were completely blank, no writing at all. Ancient runes. Matthew frowned, thinking the blank volumes might be erased 26 data or even a meditation method. Reparo. He tried repairing them with his 20, but the charm did nothing. Black, what are you doing? The bearded goblin asked, curious. Many of these books are blank. I'm trying to restore them with 26, Matthew said, leaving out the worst of his suspicions. The bearded goblin flipped through the empty pages and muttered, "Weird. Could the ink have faded?" "It shouldn't have. This library is an independent space. Once it's hidden, it becomes completely sealed, like time itself stops," Matthew said, stroking his chin. He wasn't sure what had happened here. "Never mind. Let's take them all back. Let the old men study them. We can split the blank ones between us." That was the last shelf. After packing the books, the two prepared to leave. Nothing else showed up on Matthew's scans. He'd used his 6 and found nothing. "I'll help you make the copies when we get back. It'll be quick. Old man has 8s for bookmaking. He can even draw 5s, the bearded goblin said. "These books' age gives them intrinsic value. I should get half," Matthew requested. "All right, let's go," the bearded goblin agreed. They returned to where they had entered. There was a pool there. When Matthew jumped in, the world flipped again, and he soon found himself back in the same as before. Luna and Puff Puff hadn't returned yet. As Matthew reached for 26 to message Luna, he noticed something alarming. 26 fluctuations were coming from the surrounding basilisk statues. "Looks like these books aren't going to be easy to take," Matthew said, frowning. "What did you say?" the bearded goblin asked, having just emerged. Matthew tested one of the stone carvings. A clean, sharp sound cut through the air as a transparent, arc-shaped wind blade swept across a statue and neatly severed its head. The statues weren't as hard as they looked. "What are you doing?" the bearded goblin demanded. He didn't have 6 and didn't understand. "Be careful. These statues might come to life," Matthew warned. As if on cue, the basilisk sculptures began to move. Matthew felt a relief that they were animated stone constructs rather than real basilisks. If hundreds of real basilisks had risen, they'd have to run. He waved his 28, and the green grass beside the river transformed into enormous vines. Countless tendrils shot out and wrapped around the statues. The carvings couldn't even struggle free. Matthew's 28 flared again and again, shattering the petrified basilisks one by one. "You're impressive, Black," the bearded goblin praised. But even after the statues were broken, the 26 fluctuations didn't stop. They seemed to sink into the ground and flow underground. Matthew's expression turned serious. Then, he and the goblin heard a low, distant roar. "Run!" Matthew shouted. They sprinted for the riverbank with the bearded goblin close behind, but the ground began to quake. Running felt too slow. Matthew flicked his 28 and 2 giant vines erupted from beneath their feet, snatching them up and hurling them away. The riverbed collapsed behind them, the roots of the vines tumbling into the newly opened chasm. Matthew switched to a levitation charm to set himself down gently. The bearded goblin wasn't as fortunate. He slammed into the ground and was knocked unconscious. Matthew looked back. The stone array had completely collapsed, revealing a bottomless hole. The trembling grew worse, and the roars from the abyss became clearer. What had been sealed here was not something small. Matthew levitated the goblin, casting a weight-reducing spell to make him lighter, then used the invisible hand to carry them both away. Boom! Before they'd gone far, a thunderous sound came from behind them, as if something gigantic had burst from the hole. Matthew cast a quick 4 to see. He had a bad feeling about what waited there. If it was a real basilisk, simply looking back could curse him. The vision confirmed his dread. A colossal basilisk had surged out of the abyss. Its exposed length already exceeded that of the creature in the Hogwarts Chamber of Secrets. Oddly, this serpent was different from any Matthew had known. Its eye sockets were empty, no eyes at all, and its head was vastly larger than any basilisk he had ever seen. 120. Bombardment. The basilisk opened its cavernous maw and let out an ear-splitting shriek. Fortunately, there wasn't a soul for 100 lie. If a muggle had seen a beast like this, the game would be up. The eyeless serpent flicked out its tongue as if tasting the air, then lunged straight for Matthew. fangs longer than a man was tall. Its titanic bulk didn't slow it in the least. It struck faster than Matthew's invisible hand could fly. Matthew snatched the unconscious bearded goblin and, without a second thought, apparated. Space tore, and the pair vanished. The apparition had been sloppy with the added weight. The goblin's right arm was sliced open by the warping air. The tumble didn't wake him. The fresh cut barely registered. The basilisk snapped at empty air, tasting only wind. Matthew flicked his wand and turned the grass beneath the monster into roaring flame. The eyeless beast simply smashed the fire aside and snuffed it before it could spread. Realizing the blind creature tracked heat, Matthew unleashed bolt after bolt of transfiguration, setting every patch of grass alight. Flames everywhere confused the basilisk. It lost Matthew's scent. But the fire barely affected its hide. No scorch marks, no singeing. Fiend fire. A golden blaze erupted in front of him. He tapped the air. The golden flame writhed and swelled until a serpent of living fire, 10 meters long, hung suspended before him. 10 meters was small beside the basilisk, but it was the largest Matthew could control. Fiend fire was fiendishly hard to master. A serpent this size pushed him to the edge of his skill. With a lazy flick, the golden serpent struck. The basilisk sensed the hotter, moving flame and hurled itself forward. The two colossal serpents collided. The fiend fire, having no true body, scattered at the first touch. But the scattered flames reformed around the basilisk, coiling tight. A furious hiss tore from its throat. The cursed fire had found flesh. Even the basilisk's prodigious resistance could not entirely withstand fiend fire. The cursed flames clung, charring scale and searing meat. The basilisk thrashed, desperate to shake the fire free, but every time the fiend fire broke apart, it reformed anew. Its convulsions shook the ground like an earthquake, nearly toppling Matthew. The creature healed almost as fast as it burned, wounds sealed before the fire could finish its work. Its magic resistance was staggering. The fiend fire guttered and began to die. As Matthew raised his wand for another blast, the sky dimmed and lightning began to dance among the clouds. A rush of wings filled the air. In a heartbeat, Luna swooped in on her thunderbird. Puff, puff. "Matthew, are you all right?" she called, having heard the commotion and flown straight over. "I'm fine. It's Eureka Asgar who's hurt," Matthew said, pointing at the unconscious goblin. Puff Puff's keen eyes never left the basilisk. The moment the thunderbird landed, its throat rumbled like an engine, and its tail twitched with barely restrained power. "Puff Puff changed the weather?" Matthew asked. Luna stroked its neck. "When Puff Puff's emotions surge, the sky answers. Thunderbirds ride storms. Every beat of their wings can birth black clouds and lightning. Puff Puff, can you brew a wilder, larger storm?" Matthew sketched a spiral in the air. The thunderbird studied the sky, then slowly nodded. It lifted off and vanished into the churning clouds. While Puff Puff beat the heavens into a fury, Luna looked at him, worry shining in her pale eyes. "Don't fret, I've got this," Matthew said with a small smile. "I'll move him out of your way." Luna feared she might hinder him, so Matthew's invisible hand carried her and the bearded goblin beyond the storm's reach. He then conjured a brass Faraday cage around them to shield them from stray lightning and returned to keep the basilisk occupied with fiend fire. Moments later, the entire sky was black, the air thick and heavy, thunder rumbling overhead. Matthew traced the spell model of the great lightning summoning in the air. In truth, a Hogwarts wand amplified runic magic better than any first-order relic. Spell complete, he raised his wand aloft, and lightning danced through the clouds. A deafening crack split the sky. Bolts of white-hot lightning lanced down at the eyeless basilisk. As if a gate had opened, more and more lightning poured onto the monster. A shrill hiss tore from its throat with every strike. Each bolt left a charred crater, flesh cauterized so no blood spilled. Matthew aimed each strike precisely at the basilisk's weakest point, 7 inches down its spine. At last, the serpent lay twitching, nothing but nerve endings firing. The eyeless basilisk was done. Its heart had been blasted to cinders where lightning split its spine.